Hey everybody, it's Josh with Oracle Audio coming back with another video. We're going to talk about some mixing tips today. So we're talking about the BX Console SSL 4000E. I've actually been demoing the E, the G, the J, and a couple other consoles, and I had some clients reach out and ask, like, hey, I'd love some mixing tips, some stuff about getting set up before the master, how to make things sound good, just like all the typical things that people are searching for. I'm like, all right, yeah, let's make a video. Let's talk about how to use these channel strips so that you can also impart some positive color and saturation onto your tracks that will make it sound like it is being mixed in a professional studio. So let's get after it. Okay, first things first, I'm going to walk you through all the parts of the plugin. On the right-hand side, you have the input gain. You always want to try to use a little bit of this because, again, it will add color. To the right is the V gain. This controls how much noise, just noise, is in the circuit. THD is harmonic distortion. That is going to be saturation and color. You don't hear too much of it until you start to crank that knob, but when you do, it's a lot. So we'll come back to that. Those are usually the first things I set up. Over here, we have the high pass and low pass filters. Um, Keep them engaged because they add color to the circuit. When you turn them off, they don't add the color. It's bypassed. Next, we have the compressor. Two ways to use this that we're going to talk about today. Under that is the expander. And the expander, the expander and the gate function. Gate, I'm going to explain the difference between these two because they're actually really useful to understand. A gate says, okay, here's the line. Anything below this threshold is going to get turned down by however much you set right here. Okay? That's the range. And you also have to make sure that it's showing gate. That's how the gate works. An expander says, okay, anything below this threshold that I set is going to get reduced in volume by 2 to 1. Okay, so like it's a softer way of reducing the volume and tightening up sounds as opposed to using gates which can be a bit more harsh. Love expansion on bass. Okay, next we have the EQs. So there's a high shelf, low shelf, and then a low mid bell and a high mid bell. Now, when you click on the shelf button and it says bell, these become bells. Now, there's also an EQ type. When you leave it alone, it is the SSL E type EQ. When you click it, it is the G type EQ. This gives, they say, a more Pultec curve on the EQs. What I notice most is that two things go on. One, it looks like the low mid and the high mid like somehow get switched. It's like they got moved in circuits because the low mid, even though it says it's at okay, when the EQ is normal, when the low mid is set at 1000 hertz, it's actually really more at like 600. But then when you switch the EQ type, that inaccuracy is on the high mid and not the low mid. The high mid is generally accurate on the regular EQ type, but when you hit the button and it switches it to the G type EQ, it's the high mid that's inaccurate and not the low mid. Anyway, what do you care about all this? This is what you want to know. The 4000E EQ type is going to be has more high frequency content. The G is going to have less. So if you need to smooth a sound out, if it's a little too harsh, G can be great. Okay. That pretty much covers it. So I'm going to show you how I set this up. And we'll do it on a drum track. So let's have a quick listen. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to see where's the sound peaking, and it's at -8. So I'm going to turn the gain up and then reduce it over here. I'll go up. And now I'll play it again. Bring that down just a little bit more. There. Okay, now that's close enough. So we've got in our gain. Now we're going to set in the V gain, which is the noise. So turn your volume up for this so you can hear it. It's not much. You can just hear it. So I'm going to leave it right at about here. Now, total harmonic distortion, we'll listen to the track again. It's a lot. Okay, so we'll back that down. Okay, so here's the regular, unaffected. Here's with the strip on. I actually hear it dialing back some harshness already. Okay, so interesting. All right, so now that we've set those two things, we're going to come back over here and we're going to work on the filters and the compressor and the expansion and gate. So with the filters, I'm not going to change anything. I'm just going to make sure that they're engaged a little bit. I don't want to trim anything off the high or the low, so I'm just going to leave those as is. Having them on and engaged imparts color onto the sound, so we will leave them as is. Now we're going to move on to the compressor section, and I'm going to show you the two ways to work with the SSL EQ. The typical way, or like the way that you would work with a normal compressor, is setting your ratio. So let's say you set it to 4:1, and then lowering the threshold until it starts to affect the top of the sound, basically the peaks or like the essentially like the top end of the dynamic range. That's one way of compressing. Now, if you turn ratio all the way down, get the threshold all the way to -20. Now, instead of just getting the tops of the sound, we're compressing the entire mix or the entire track. This is good for shaping sounds. This is usually my preferred method, but you always try both to see what's going to work, and then you adjust the release based on the material that you're hearing. So let's do that right now. Let's start with we'll just hear it as is. And we're going to do the whole sound method first. And I'm watching the meters down here. Anywhere around 3 to 6 is where it sounds good. Once you start getting a little bit higher than that, it's a little over compressed. So we're going to go into that territory and then back it down. Okay, so that's over compressed. Right there feels good for me. Let's hear it off and set the release. Okay, let's hear it the other way. So we'll turn this the other direction. We'll set this to like 3:1. All right, let's try this. I don't like that as much. I think that's where I like it. Okay, so now that we've done the compressor, let's go ahead and move on to the gate and expansion. So again, make sure that says gate for it to be gate. Turn this off so that we're in the normal threshold levels. The range, start with it all the way up, and then with release, keep it where it's at for now. Let's have a listen. We're going to turn this threshold on the right here all the way up. That should basically like mute almost all the sound. Perfect. Now let's back it down. Okay, so we want to cut all this extra noise and even some of the ringing off the hi-hat. That sounds good to me. Now here's expansion. A little bit different. Depends on what you need. We'll leave this as is right now because I'm going to start to EQ out some of that high end. Let's give it a listen. There. Okay, let's hear this off. See how much more tame that is? We could even probably bring this up a bit. Maybe just a touch more bass. Sounds kind of nice. All right, let's hear this on and off. So what was the point of doing all this? Well, we cleaned up the sound. So all that extra audio clouds up your mix and makes it harder for you to hear the other important stuff. So we want to make sure that everything's nice, tight, feels gelled together, and there's nothing extra dangling off of the sides that are going to like interfere with your track. So cleaner is always better in terms of we don't want extra audio tails on things that aren't helping us. And so it's interesting because this sounds a little bit cleaner, even though we're actually imparting saturation and distortion on the sound. So I think it's interesting how it dials the harshness back, even without having to engage much of the EQ. So now let's listen to this with the other EQ type. Definitely like less high end. Feels like a little bit more papery, like a little bit cloudier. So if you've got a harsh sound, this is a great way to dial back that harshness. Yeah, anyway, so this is the BX console SS4000E. This is how I use it to work on signals, audio tracks. I would recommend using this in your mixes if you are looking for some analog character, but also if you're learning how to tame and control sound. So, and it also, yeah, okay, so you guys have a great one. I really appreciate you for tuning in, and we'll see y'all next time.